Good morning and welcome back to the Great Lakes International Innovation Summit. We're really excited to have the Corporate Innovation panel next. Mike McCann, Chief Business Development Officer for Rev1 Ventures, is going to be moderating this panel, and I know that you will enjoy the content. Please feel free to put questions in the Q&A box to the left or to the right. Thank you.
Megan, thank you so much for that introduction. I am absolutely thrilled to be here, and I get the distinct pleasure of moderating an excellent panel for you all this morning. We'll have great leaders from Verizon, from Youngstown Business Incubator, and from Plug and Play. My name, again, Mike McCann. I'm with Rev1 Ventures. Rev1, a little bit about who we are. We are a startup studio based out of Columbus, Ohio, where we provide services and capital to entrepreneurs and innovators. So we spend a lot of time working directly with startups. We spend a lot of time working with dozens of corporations and partners and trying to find alignment between the two. So what we're going to talk about today is this topic of corporate innovation. And when you think of corporate innovation broadly, it means a lot of different things. It means a lot of different things to different people and organizations. It can mean how you think of your corporate culture. You can think of product development. You can think of research and development. What we're going to initially focus this discussion on today is the area of corporate innovation that really aligns with engaging and working with entrepreneurs and startups. Each panelist that we have here directly or through their teams spends a lot of time at that intersection. And one of the reasons we want to pick that as a topic is just a couple of data points. In 2021 alone, so through Q3 2021, there has been roughly $250 billion with a B invested in startups, venture capital invested in startups. So 12 or 13,000 individual deals have been funded so far this year. And out of that 250 billion, well over 100 billion has been corporate venture capital. So it's really hard to think about corporate innovation and what it means without thinking about that strategic engagement and that investment that can come about when you're working with entrepreneurs and startups. So that's the backdrop. I really encourage anyone in attendance, please, as we go through some of these introductions, drop the questions you want to cover into the chat now. I'm happy to pull those up and bring them into the discussion throughout the conversation today. But what we're going to do to start is we're going to have each of our panelists give their own introduction, go through a few slides, just giving some background, so you have something that you can watch as they're going through that. But then we'll do a moderated Q&A for a little bit, and then at the end we'll have time for open Q&A. So please drop those questions in throughout. I'll make sure we keep an eye on them as we see our panelists come up. But we're going to start first and foremost with Jessica from Verizon giving an overview of her background and what she does with Verizon.
Thanks so much, Mike. And thank you to the Great Lakes International Innovation Conference for having me and my colleague Bree this morning. We're so excited to be part of this regional approach to innovation. So a little bit about Verizon. At Verizon, we create the networks that move the world forward. Verizon Communications is one of the world's leading providers of technology, communications, information, and entertainment products and services. We have a presence around the world. Verizon generated revenues of $128.3 billion in 2020, and the company offers voice, data, and video services solutions all on our award-winning networks and platforms, delivering on customers' demands for mobility, reliable network connectivity, security, and control. But that's a lot about Verizon, and we do a lot, but today we're talking about innovation, which is really at the core of what we do at Verizon. We work with startups, which we're going to kick off this panel with, through three different avenues: our corporate social responsibility strategy, our VC arm, Verizon Ventures, and our 5G labs. So right now what you're looking at is a little summary of Verizon Ventures. From the VC side, at Ventures, our goal is to bridge between far-reaching concepts and the vast resources of Verizon. So we navigate the growing edge of new platforms to find entrepreneurs and help them develop the technology solutions that many people might not even imagine today. And I know in the Q&A, we will dig into this a little bit more. So just a brief intro. Next slide, Mike. We also have our 5G labs. We have 5 5G labs in the United States and 1 in London. We're continuing to grow and expand that. And this is a different approach to collaboration and collaborative innovation. So through our 5G labs, we're creating opportunities for academic, startups, and enterprises to create new use cases for 5G. And 5G, of course, is the next generation of wireless connectivity that Verizon is building across the country. We look for new ways with our partners that 5G can be used, combined with edge computing, and all of this is with the goal of creating new outcomes that are both exciting and exploring the limits of new technology. And you can, see a little bit more of that on the screen here. Next slide, Mike. We jumpstart innovation at our 5G labs across industry and society through programs like the ones pictured here. And I won't read them off, but you can get a sense of the breadth of the work that we do in our 5G labs. And our 5G labs initiative we provide funding, access to advisory support from Verizon and our partners, access to 5G, and some combination of all these things in many cases. So that's our 5G labs. Our corporate social responsibility efforts, our goal is really to fund and create initiatives that drive impact through innovation. And this is, we of course do a lot more with our corporate social responsibility, but this slice is what we're going to be talking about today. We currently have 2 ongoing initiatives. And Mike, next slide, please. Our Verizon Forward for Good, which is focused on social accelerators at the professional and the college levels. And we also have another initiative that supports Black and Latinx funders. So just a little bit about our Forward for Good accelerator to give you a taste. This is a cohort-based program. We're implementing it in partnership with ALLY, which some of you may have heard of, to help scale technology solutions that leverage leading-edge technologies like 5G, MEC, AI, XR to drive social impact specifically. So we pair startups with industry experts and technology leaders and representatives from the communities that they seek to serve. The accelerator launched last April with a focus on climate justice, and we're going to be focusing on different impact areas over time. The next application period is actually happening right now, and we're seeking startups with a focus on disability innovation. So each accelerator will feature a different focus area as this program continues. Next slide, please, Mike. And on the college level, we've actually partnered with the Clinton Global Initiative University, which is just a great initiative and organization. And this challenge supports a diverse community of student innovators in leveraging leading edge technology, again, like 5G, to address pressing social issues in the US in education, climate and environment, peace and human rights, poverty alleviation, and public health. Next slide, because I don't have a slide for this part of our initiative, but we can move on. We also have our last initiative that I want to just intro here is to support Black and Latinx founders of technology startups. So our pilots began this year with 2 programs, TechRise in Chicago, which is in partnership with P33 and 1871, and another in Houston in partnership with Div Inc. Through these programs, we are providing non-dilutive funding, accelerated programming, and technology coaching and expertise to early-stage underrepresented founders. In Chicago, currently, may not know this, but only 1.9% of venture capital goes to Black and Latinx founders. So TechRise was developed to create an inclusive tech ecosystem that includes pitch competitions and an online community of resources that's hosted by P33, all the way to training, mentorship, and tailored education and support programming delivered by 1871. We're really excited about this new initiative to expand our support of diverse founders into new cities in the years to come. So perhaps we'll see one in Ohio. These initiatives and more are all part of Citizen Verizon. And like I said, our corporate social responsibility efforts are so broad, and Citizen Verizon is our responsible business plan for economic, environmental, and social advancement. And Verizon has actually committed $3 billion to the Citizen Verizon efforts through 2025. So, Mike, that's really it for me in terms of an intro. I'm looking forward to digging in a little bit more and sharing more with our attendees. And thank you so much for allowing me to kick this off.
Jessica, thank you. It was a great background and overview of the work that Verizon is doing around innovation and working with entrepreneurs. And I'm sure will spark many questions from our audience today. Thank you. Barb, would you like to come in and introduce yourself and Youngstown Business Incubator?
Sure. Thanks, Mike, for the opening, and glad to give a little bit of background. Are you pulling up the slides? There we go. So the Youngstown Business Incubator has a pretty storied reputation. We've been around since the year 2000, and if people know us, they know us as a technology incubator. We have one of the largest graduates for the entrepreneurial services program that the state of Ohio has ever seen. Kearney Technologies was our largest graduate by far, have been acquired several times, and a lot we can talk about with corporate innovation there. We continue to be part of the Jumpstart Entrepreneurial Services Program, providing services to technology startups across the 21 counties in Northeast Ohio. We still remain very involved with software startups. We do a lot of work in digital. But over the course of the last few years, we've been transitioning more and more of our programming and more of the startups that we're working with into from backgrounds of advanced manufacturing. In the year 2010, we had the good fortune to become the home for the National Additive Manufacturing Innovation Institute, which is an Obama administration program designed to really accelerate the use of additive manufacturing or 3D printing by industry to keep the United States as competitive as possible. When that program came on campus, we developed a number of different programs, and we'll talk about some of those towards the end. But most significantly, we started providing support for startups in that space, and are very proud of the work that we're doing. We had our first big exit in additive earlier this year. One of our young companies, two of whom were part of our YBI family, they both worked for YBI at one point, had developed an advanced materials capability for additive, and it was acquired by X1, one of the original equipment manufacturers in this industry. A great story for us and something that we're very proud of. We also, because we are always looking for new ways to fill roles in our community, had started developing a woman in entrepreneurship program about 5 years ago, and started running cohorts of programming to create, grow, and launch and grow women-owned businesses in the Mahoning Valley. And that led us to become the Minority Business Assistance Center for the Eastern Corridor of Ohio. So from Ashtabula, running down the Ohio border to Monroe County, we provide services across the board to any startup, regardless of the background. So it's any veteran, women-owned, socially or economically disadvantaged business, or obviously minority-based business. But that effectively translates into our tagline, which is elevating every entrepreneur. Earlier this year, we developed a program to support youth entrepreneurship, and it really has transformed the feel of the organization. It has brought a new energy to us. And our youngest founder sells shea butter, and she is 8 years old. So Mike, if you'll jump to the next slide, we'll make this transition. So I mentioned the fact that we've been developing additional programming around additive manufacturing, and that takes really two different forms. We have a great startup program and are developing a specific commercialization model around new technologies coming out of additive. So it could be a software product, new pieces of equipment, materials, post-processing technologies. We were awarded with, under the leadership of Magnet, our MEP, Team Neo, one of the Jobs Ohio partners, and Jumpstart, a program through the US EDA called Resilient Ohio, which will work with young companies in advanced manufacturing, not just additive, but any advanced manufacturing space. But also, more interestingly, for the first time, we'll have the resources to be able to work with existing manufacturers who don't intend to spin out the technologies into new areas, into a new company. So we can work with an existing manufacturer who has a product that they want to take to market. Never have we really been able to do that with any kind of state support before. And we're really excited for the opportunities that this presents. We're going to be doing some reverse pitch competitions around that, identifying industry problems that we want to work to solve, and also really working to raise awareness around investment opportunities in advanced manufacturing in this space, because as everybody knows, you can have the greatest idea in the world, but if you can't get it funded, you're not going to make it very far. Last but not least, we also have a program, a staff of about 6 people that work with industry and government partners to help insert additive manufacturing into a manufacturing process. So we have done very large projects with Goodyear Tire and Rubber, Valoric, GE Additive, and also the US Air Force, and currently an Army project, really doing very hands-on work to support the adoption and integration of additive in a smart way. So not just buying a piece of equipment for the sake of buying a piece of equipment and trying to figure it out. Going back to the idea of being innovative and trying to find new ways of doing things, we were the first beta site for an Israeli technology in North America. We have an XJet Carmel 1400 ceramic printer that allows us to do really innovative things in the 5G space, aerospace, biomedical, and that project is really one of the things that we're most proud of. As everything, it had some hiccups during COVID, but we are getting it back up online with the support of Jobs Ohio and are excited about that. And if you would jump to the last slide, I will wrap up. Tied to that team, but not to additive specifically, we also work with the US Air Force on getting more small businesses across the country, not just in Northeast Ohio, but anywhere, identify SBIR and STTR opportunities and go through the application process through a project called Apex. We are partnered through Parallax Advanced Research in Beaver Creek, Ohio on this project, and our counterparts at Bright and Warren. And we've had a great success with that, with a 75% win rate last time. And I think there might be one more slide behind that. Oh, and last but not least, we've been really proud to be partnered with Team NEO on creating the Northeast Ohio Additive Manufacturing Cluster. And again, with the support of Jobs Ohio, have worked on an Ohio Additive Manufacturing Cluster, trying to tie innovation and bring larger companies, not just startups, into the fold in terms of really understanding the applications for additive, creating new research opportunities, and just really building capacity around it. It's been a great addition for both our startups and also in terms of trying to engage our region's economy and the innovation economy. So with that, I will wrap up and jump into the fray when at the next step.
Barb, thank you so much for that introduction, and we're so grateful to have you on the panel today. And I think it really comes out as you go through YBI and what you do, that alignment of industry and large companies and what you do to work hand to hand with entrepreneurs. And so I'm really excited to not only get to ask you some more questions in a little bit, but to hear what kind of questions come up from the audience. Last but by no means least, Jennifer Thomas with Plug and Play. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background and what you do with Plug and Play?
Will do. Thanks, Mike, so much for having me. And definitely thanks, Megan Reichert, for always staying in touch and inviting me today. It's so exciting to be part of this panel and really fascinating to hear how much work Verizon and YBI are doing in the innovation space. You know, since COVID, we've all been a little bit disconnected, but this is really excellent information. So I really appreciate it. We can go to the first slide, Mike. All right, awesome. So we are Plug and Play, and what we do across the country, we're across the world. We're located in Silicon Valley as our headquarters, but across the company and across the world, what we do is to connect the best startups to our national and global healthcare partners to really help them bring technology and innovation to market faster. And we do this in almost every industry worldwide. But when it comes to healthcare, which is what I am managing director of Plug and Play Health in the US, we're specifically addressing the need to improve the patient experience, improve patient outcomes, and especially improve the provider experience as well. Can't forget about the providers. So let's go to the next slide, if you would, Mike. So the way we accomplish this is we have like 3 elements to our platform. And the first is we run accelerator programs, and we do this actually on behalf of our corporate partners, meaning that they get to choose the startups that enter our 12-week programs. And we do the accelerator programs twice per year in every vertical. We have over 60 accelerators all around the world, and we serve 38 locations at this point. Cleveland being one of them, and of course, our Silicon Valley in health. Also, we assist corporations in their open innovation efforts. So really varied across industry, but we're helping them scout and discover, test drive the right startups to really enhance their ability to innovate or invest or find new revenue opportunities that advance their businesses. So we do this for 500 corporations worldwide. And then finally, last but not least, we are an investor, and we focus on early stage seed and Series A global startups. And we invest in over 200 startups worldwide every year. So with that, let's jump to the next slide. We can chat about where we're located. So we are global. You can see all of our locations. We're lucky enough to have established a location in Cleveland in 2018 around health, and we've really grown since then. So we're actually hiring right now as well. So be sure to check out our website for the positions of venture analyst and senior corporate development manager. But we are in almost every location. This is a strength for us, so that when we are sourcing startups for our corporate partners, we are looking all over the world. So you may be located in the US, but we might find the best solution for you somewhere in Europe or Abu Dhabi or even Japan. So it's really a strength to have all these locations and to have this vast network among our colleagues. Let's go to the next slide. This is also one of our strengths. We started out about in 2006, really doing this matching between startups and corporations. We started out in brand and retail and fintech, which were kind of hot at the time, looking at startup solutions, but we have expanded, even to the point where we have now verticals that go across all industries, such as sustainability or enterprise. So you can see us there in the second column, second row in health. But often when we're sourcing for a solution, we never know if we're going to find the solution, let's say in supply chain or in mobility, something that has been developed for a driverless vehicle or autonomous vehicle could also work in a hospital setting where you're, testing out or trying to evaluate someone's, blood pressure in a contactless way with not touching them. So we never know where we're going to find the next solution, and it really is great to have so many industries that we cover. Can you go to the next slide, Mike? Thanks. So we have 42 global health partners at this point. We have 17 of those in the US. We serve providers, hospitals, pharmaceuticals, and then recently a lot of industry in government, because COVID has really heightened the need for solutions in healthcare, no matter where you are, whether you're a hospital or not, or whether you're just a corporation that has a health program and needs to really give employees their best coverage. So next slide. Yeah, so I'm going to go over this in a little bit later, but we have worked with so many corporations and done so many pilots at this point. And a pilot is usually a time-limited engagement when a startup and a corporation work together to see if there's a good fit. And we really do have a checklist of items that really should be covered as a corporation and a startup start to engage in the pilot. So I won't cover this now, but I will talk about it in depth in a little bit. Just making sure that we've got a lot of learnings from the best practices, so that it's no longer painful to work with a startup. So you can go to the next slide. We'll finish it off. Here's my contact information. If anyone needs to get in touch with me, please do. We are located in Cleveland. We have a staff of, I think, about 8 people at this point and growing. So we're located off of West 25th Street in the co-working of Limelight. And so please come see us if you can, especially post-COVID. As things start to open up, we'll be there. So thanks, Mike, again for the opportunity, and really excited for the conversation today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. And again, thank you, Barb and Jessica as well. So let's bring our esteemed panel back up. So now we're at the point, I think we have until roughly 11:45. So that's great. We have about 50 minutes here. So try to spend maybe up to half of that here with some questions from me. But please, as we're going through, as you heard some of the backgrounds of each individual and their companies, feel free to throw some questions into the comments, and I'll make sure to bring some of those in along the way. But what I'll do as a warm up is maybe a question for each of you, and we'll go around the group. Is when you think of large companies working with startups, sometimes I hear a couple of things. From big companies, sometimes you hear, well, it'll never work. We're too slow. It's too hard to be nimble and work with these crazy dreaming entrepreneurs. And from startups, sometimes you hear, well, we'd love to work with some of these companies and partner with them, but we're afraid of the competition, or there are reasons maybe we shouldn't. So I want to get each of you and your thoughts. Is it a great opportunity, a match made in heaven, bringing these big companies that want to move faster and these smaller companies who want customers and partnerships, or is it just a fool's errand at the end of the day? Maybe we'll start. I'll go to the middle of my screen here. So Barb, maybe you can start by answering us just kind of your view on large industry enterprises working with startups.
Well, it's one of the things we really always encourage our startups to try to do. And we also really cultivate relationships with larger companies to try to marry them up, to make happy relationships between the two. And I think it's important from two different standpoints. First and foremost, the startups eventually have to get to that level where they can engage with a large company and make their way through that process. They have to understand both the need, the problem that they're solving, and they also have to understand how to sell to them and how to make the message relevant. From an economic development standpoint, we need our companies, all of our companies, to be innovative and leaning into new technologies rather than doing the same thing all the time. So if we're not creating those connections and trying to facilitate that process, we should be aware that there are people in other communities, or it's just happening naturally in other communities, and our existing industrial base is just going to continue to fall behind. It's to the greater good that we do this, no matter how difficult it is. We need to try.
That's great. Thank you. Jessica, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we at Verizon, we definitely see it as a match made in heaven. This is precisely the reason why we have our venture capital arm, our 5G labs. This type of connection between startups and a large company like Verizon is what is going to propel everybody's the innovation forward, particularly when innovators and entrepreneurs and startup founders are able to harness and leverage the Verizon network, the speed and the low latency of 5G. I mean, this is really why we're here, is to help startup entrepreneurs and founders think about how they can leverage our technology. And there's a huge benefit to building long-term relationships with these entrepreneurs and fostering the collaboration between founders and our teams that specialize in this area, because we want to accelerate growth and commercialization within the field of technology. And I'll just say, in addition to that, is that we are very open about how to work with us. And, we might get into it here on the panel, but our ventures team is out there. We are forthright about what we're looking for and how startup entrepreneurs and founders can work with us. And that's part of, how, to Barb's point, we want to make it easy to work with us because we have shared goals and objectives, and we want to see success in this area.
That's great. Thank you, Jessica. Jennifer, I think I know where you stand on this, but maybe you could outline a little bit of this just from your view and what it means for plug and play in the company.
Yeah, I'm with Jessica and Barb on this one. For us, we work with corporations and hospitals, and innovation means something different to every single one of them. We find that they're all in a different place on the innovation journey. So sometimes innovation means, let me see what's out there. Other times it means I'm starting to explore different solutions. Sometimes it means show me the trends. Other times it means I know exactly the problem I need to solve, and I want to work with startups on this. So we really try to be respectful of where they come, from and how they're approaching us. Because if you don't understand that, then it can be a disaster and you can get burned. And then it's really hard to do it again, especially if you have to prove to management that innovation is good and working with startups is productive. And so, so that part of it is really important. For us, the match made in heaven in healthcare is now. You can imagine, I hear Barb working in manufacturing for so long. This has been, I'm sure, a long slog to get manufacturers to the point where, they're starting to accept this. In healthcare, it was even worse. There was hardly any real sort of activity before COVID. There was some, I don't want to say none, but it just wasn't as robust. COVID pushed everyone to the wall to have to make really tough decisions about finding solutions that were going to reach people and increase access to care, given what happened. And because of that, it just really advanced a couple of things. First of all, the technology exists. So, the AI and the ML is there. We're getting better at data capture. We're really starting to be able to understand how to use data and how to gain insights from it. And we're also learning, especially with healthcare, that the startups have learned, they learned that, in a really public way, where's the pain? What do hospitals need? What does pharma need? What does retail pharmacy need in order to move the system forward? Because it was so clear to the entire world how the healthcare system was impacted by this pandemic. So right now for healthcare, it's definitely a match made in heaven.
Great, thank you. And Jennifer, I'll stick with you for this next question. In your work, you went through the number of startups you have in your network, the number of partners. I'm wondering if you could share. I'm always interested in thinking about ways. I believe there's areas of alignment and natural alignment between large enterprises, especially the innovation teams that are there, as well as entrepreneurs. But there's also some potential conflicts. I wonder if you could maybe just describe, from the things that you observe, what are the things where you do find commonalities or areas to work together, and then what are some of the natural ways where maybe there's conflict or things that you have to kind of help smooth over or massage when you're making some of these connections and relationships?
Yeah, well, because of the pandemic, I think startups and our hospitals and our healthcare organizations are aligned. Everyone is kind of trying to reach the same goal. How do you increase the patient outcomes and improve them? How do you make it easier for providers? How do you make things more efficient? How do you improve access to care? I think it was Jessica who talked about, really reaching people who have typically maybe even been off the grid. How do you get, pull in access so that you're addressing a larger population? So I think there's a lot of alignment with that right now. When it comes to conflict, I don't really think there's conflict. I really think it's just about making sure the fit and the match are there. And so that is something that is, it's a dance for sure, but, both sides have to be open, where the startups need to understand how the providers work. What's the process flow? What are the resources? Is there a strategy? And so on. And I think, in order for innovation to work very well in a hospital setting or a pharma setting, it really helps if you have an entity or a department that's a liaison, and can really smooth through those conflicts. Like, I know this business unit needs to work on remote patient monitoring. I know that business unit wants to work on a digital front door. How do we bring this together so that we can make kind of a smooth process and make it easier so that the individual departments don't have to come up with their own process, right? Like, each organization needs to have a strategy. They need to have resources behind this, both budget and talent. They need to have the right governance structure, so that, startups don't get bottlenecked or pilots don't get stopped. They need to have the ability to have a lean, repeatable process that kind of consistent throughout the organization. And then finally, what are the metrics? What are you trying to achieve in advance? And when those things are there, we don't see the conflict happening between the two parties.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think one of the things that I often think of is startups have a rhythm. You know, they had their early on, they're doing some validation, then they get into the market and they're kind of hitting scale, and there's always this alignment or fit of startups need different things at different times in that life cycle. And sometimes if they're more mature and you're a larger company, you know, maybe you just need to be a customer for that later stage company. But early on, maybe they're still trying to figure some things out. And maybe it's not a traditional customer relationship. It's a joint development project. It's going to be something that's much more sophisticated or nuanced. And as an entity, to think to your point, if you're not ready or have the mechanisms to do those kinds of projects, you create that friction. You know, all of a sudden, some of those things become a little bit harder to do. So a lot of that prep work of saying, is now the right time? Is the right solution? Is it a big enough problem? Those are the things that your checklist. Yeah, I like what you had there. A couple of those things. You know, if you have a few open boxes there, you're probably asking yourself, is this really the right one that we ought to be spending time with?
And our endpoint or goal is pilot. So we encourage, like, test drive, check it out. Let us show you a lot of them so you can see what might be the fit, try it out, and then see whether you go to white label or acquisition or just a vendor relationship, you know, because these are big decisions and they're hard decisions for sure.
Oh, that's great. I'll switch gears. Jessica, looking in your direction. So you're with Verizon, and among the four companies represented in this panel, you're the largest company by a smidge. You know, what are and you talked about in your summary some of the ways that you work with entrepreneurs. I'm wondering if you could share, you know, and as I've gotten to know you and getting there, you know, some of those were even illuminating to me. But what are some of the misconceptions or things that maybe there are around Verizon or entrepreneurs seeking to work with you that you encounter and you have to help, you know, folks, you know, overcome or understand when it comes to your role in the innovation and entrepreneur economy?
Yeah, so I think one misconception is that it's going to be hard to reach us or difficult to understand what we're looking for. And, you know, again, I can dig into that a little bit more. Our ventures team is really enthusiastic about working with founders and seeing what fits, as long as there's a mutual understanding of what we're looking for, you know, at Verizon Ventures. But I may take this opportunity to just pivot just a little bit, because I think another misconception is that outside of the startup space is that Verizon is only here for founders and entrepreneurs as a seller of products and services. And we're just so much more than that. I gave a little bit of an intro, but for those entrepreneurs that are looking at, you know, brick and mortar or Main Street small businesses, through our Citizen Verizon socially responsible business plan, we've just launched what we're calling Verizon Small Business Digital Ready. And this is a free online curriculum that's designed to give small businesses the tools that they need to thrive in today's digital economy. We know the world is going digital, and as you know, some of my co-panelists said, COVID has really shifted everything. And one of the big shifts during COVID was that small businesses realized that they may not have the digital tools or the know-how or the wherewithal to have that online presence or the expertise that they need to continue their business in a digital economy. So right now, you know, and customers, of course, nobody could go out and shop. So customers across many industries were turning to online marketplaces to do their business. Verizon Digital Ready is all about helping small businesses adapt to this new landscape that's really essential for future success. So just to give a little taste of what this platform is that we will provide small businesses, it's free. All they have to do is register, and in return, they receive personalized learning plans that cover financing, marketing, and operations, coaching from business experts across legal, marketing, business planning, and other topics, peer networking with other small business owners, just like them, or perhaps different in different stages, and other incentives such as solutions, products, and services. And to be very honest, the one thing that I love about this platform, aside from all of the benefits and the resources it provides, is that it was actually developed in partnership with small business owners who understand what it takes to succeed in the digital economy. So this is not, you know, Verizon, of course, we have curated it and birthed it and put it online, but small business owners were really the ones that developed this with us in partnership. And it's easy to use. all the information is in one place. And I think that people are surprised that Verizon has made a commitment to support 1 million small businesses by 2030. This is a huge way of how we're doing that. And I think that this is something that folks may not think of when they think of Verizon. They think we're just here to sell them services and products, but this is a really important way that we are giving back to Main Street small businesses, and we hope that people will check it out and see what they can get out of it in this new economy.
Mike, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, please, Barb.
One of the programs that we are just in the process of kicking off is to work with small businesses to help tech enable them. So even if they're a very traditional business, we want to help them figure out how to make sure that they've got the very best accounting system they can have online. Because one of the challenges we saw with the payroll protection program was that companies couldn't respond to provide the information that they needed to their banks in order to get into the system. So we've got to take advantage of all of the technology tools that are out there, from search engine optimization and online sales to, again, accounting and finance, whatever that is. We've got to make sure that our companies can use those technologies. And we've got a program that will kick off after the first of the year to work with students to help these businesses who may not be comfortable with technologies really understand where they can be deploying it better. And that will also help to bring in sales from outside the region and just make them more competitive overall. I think it'll be transformational for them, but it's not enough. You just can't look at the tech economy as we're thinking about technology innovation. It really can help every small business be more innovative and be more competitive through the use of technology.
Yeah, those are great comments. And Jessica, as I'm thinking about some of the work that Verizon is doing, and Barb, some of the similar things you mentioned, it's not just helping those businesses, but it's when I think of it from a pure innovation and how does Verizon get a return on that potential? You're enabling those businesses to grow and thrive, and the more those businesses grow, the more market you can have. So you kind of getting down to the fundamentals, I think, as you said, I think earlier, Jennifer, what are some of your goals? At some level, in addition to helping those companies, you want to think of how does this push the boundaries of where you're working in different areas. Barb, sticking with you for a moment. You mentioned some of the things you do working with entrepreneurs, but I'm curious to get your thoughts. A lot of what you talked about was in your introduction was the work you do to support industry and to support larger enterprises. So as you're out working with some of those enterprises and maybe introducing some of these entrepreneurs and how they could potentially work together, where are you spending your most time, or maybe the more of your conversation with those folks, coaching them through? Or what areas do you find coming up that you're trying to help them push past in order to either get in the door or get relationships completed?
So one of the things we really pride ourselves on is not being a cookie cutter organization. So we try very hard to meet companies where they are, rather than saying, this is our program and you need to fit into it. We try to figure out how we can best assist them. Because we launched our advanced manufacturing program around the presence of America Makes, it is obviously our deepest bench where we have the most comfort. And we can do everything from a walkthrough to try to identify just some low-hanging fruit. Maybe a traditional manufacturer can use additive for low volume tooling, or perhaps they're not using it effectively as they could be for prototyping or creating jigs and fixtures. But we also want to be in the game if they are looking at really being disruptive and truly trying to find new ways to redesign a product and really be disruptive within a marketplace. So this really falls more in line with our entrepreneurship program, but we've got a great story of Fitz Frames, a company that was founded in Southern California that is using 3D printing to make custom fit eyeglasses for people. They started out selling principally to children, but they are literally using 3D printing to make specialized glasses for every customer that they sell. One of the reasons that they're here is because we do have such a deep bench, such a strong background in additive. We're really able to help them through some of the manufacturing processes that they just would have had greater challenges on, because we really do understand that technology. One of the projects that we worked on from an industrial standpoint is with Valeric, which is a local steel mill that uses additive, to make a different piercing point for cutting through the steel. They have something that looks like a missile that pierces through the steel, why it's called a piercing point, to make the pipes. And we were able to use an additive technology for printing sand cores to put better cooling channels in there to make those tools last longer and make them ultimately more cost effective. That's one project, but there are any number of other ones that we could look at, and they are both large and small. As we look to the future, we're starting to build capacity in other advanced manufacturing areas. We've got some funding coming forward that will allow us to especially look at industrial IoT and sensors, because that's really one of the areas that's ripe for the picking. Getting out and engaging with our local manufacturers to help them understand how they can be using sensors for predictive maintenance, so that they know before the machine goes down that funny sound that they're hearing or that slight variation in the final product is happening, when they can still fix it before it actually leads to a shutdown. There's a local story that I believe is probably true, that when in the years before the steel mills went down, there were millions of dollars of new equipment sitting in storage. And really, it was an open secret. Everybody knew that change was coming and it was going to hit us very hard, but there just wasn't the will to really implement the new technology. And we, for years looked in retrospect, asking the question, why didn't anybody say anything? Why wasn't anybody doing anything to try to push that technology onto the floor before the collapse happened? And I don't want the future to look back at us and say, why weren't you doing anything? Why weren't you pushing these technologies? So we want to be both deep and wide in these new areas.
Great. Thank you, Barb. We'll switch gears. Jennifer, I want to go back to you. And again, you see so many connections at this intersection of corporate innovation and entrepreneurs. I'm wondering if you could describe, maybe for both audiences, both the corporate innovator and maybe the entrepreneur, what are some of the pitfalls or mistakes you see commonly made, and maybe we'll start with the corporate side. How can innovators avoid some of those pitfalls to improve the odds of their success as they're venturing into this area?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. First of all, I want to comment on what Barb said, because I love how she described, sometimes you're just looking for efficiency, sometimes you're really looking for disruption. We see the exact same thing in healthcare. Manufacturing healthcare couldn't be different, right? More different, but it's really the same approach. As long as the company starts to explore what the opportunities are and understand where their issues are, I think they're going to make a lot of progress. So I think what I'll do is kind of walk through. Again, we really encourage pilots. We encourage, our specialty is this targeted sourcing. So we request from a healthcare company, what is the problem that you'd really love to solve? Give us some criteria around it. What are the parameters? Do you want to see startups that are really advanced? Do you want to see early stage? So we really try to work with them to understand where that sort of inflection point is, of where we can really start to show them some solutions. Once that happens, and they move along, sort of the continuum, we hope they get to a pilot, to a place where they can test. And in order to do that effectively, a couple of things have to happen. First, again, establishing this clear problem statement. What are you trying to solve? Not what technology are you looking for? We've all heard that. But what are you trying to solve? Then make sure the startup fit is there. We've had examples where a provider was looking for a digital front door. We showed them a bunch of solutions. What they found was a startup that they really liked. They liked the team. They liked the technology. The technology wasn't the fit, but then they started working with this team to solve another problem. And the other problem was, how to contact patients post-discharge, meaning they've had surgery, they're out of the hospital. Most patients don't answer their phones. You can't get in touch with them. You don't know how they are. So they developed this startup developed a chatbot that would pop up on the phone, ask a few questions, and voila, it increased, the contact rate. So you never know where that connection is going to happen. The fit is really important. Establishing the intended outcomes in advance. What do you want to see happen? Here's the problem. You want to solve it. What's get to the vision of what you would like to see. Strong communication lines are really important between the startup and the company. Healthcare is so challenging. We have regulatory issues. We have privacy issues. We have IRBs where, a review board has to approve anything that's patient facing. There's so many levels. If you need data, it all has to be de-identified and so on. This communication has to be throughout the organization. So do you need to talk to IT? The startup need to have a line to IT. Is there something that legal has to know about? Who else do they have to communicate with? So communication is key. Integration. So in the early days, i.e. pre-COVID, we would see startups come to a hospital. Here's my solution. It's great. Hospital would be like, wow, we love that. Let's do it. And then there's no way to integrate it into the EMR. Someone has to do that. Luckily, startups now know that is their responsibility. So a lot of them come solution ready, available to integrate. That's really key. And then shorten the procurement process. I don't know if, Barb, you've had trouble with this, but oh my gosh, that can really kill stuff in legal. Oh my gosh. So as a corporation, try to understand that you're working with a different entity here. It's not a standard vendor. We're not saying that, break all rules, but try to shorten that process, because a startup could die by the time, if they sit in legal for that long, they might not be there for you. And then identify budget ownership. Who owns the money that can either pay for the pilot or ultimately allow this vendor relationship to happen? So those kind of the 7 to 8 things that we see are really important for a corporation to look at when they're trying to get this done.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. That's such valuable information, because you can see how and governance probably isn't the most appealing word to think about when you're thinking about innovators. You're probably thinking about a different way of operating. But having some of these tools in place, you can tell if any one of those things isn't there, these projects, you're kind of leaving a chance. A lot of these things can wander off.
And you don't want them to end up in what we call pilot purgatory.
Yep.
Where, hey, I love that startup. That's really great. They start working with them, and then something has completely thrown up a wall, and you still love the startup, but they can't make any progress. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then, we always look at it, and you see this too. So much of what you're doing is not just there to help the corporation, but you're helping the entrepreneur along the way. You want to, there's so many things that startup CEO or that team has to do. You don't want to waste an ounce of time with a project that doesn't have that next step defined and moving after. So I'm sure there's a lot of coaching that you do on the startup side, asking, those same 7 or 8 questions of the company as they're going through that.
I'll tell you what, startups in healthcare, and I would love to hear from Jessica and Barb to hear if they've experienced the same thing. Startups in healthcare since COVID, the formula changed. VCs were sitting on a lot of money. They realized that healthcare was front and center, and they started pouring money into digital health startups like never before. You had mentioned, I think, 200 billion overall in investments this year, 100 billion in corporate. We can tell you that 30 billion worldwide in digital health, which is phenomenal this year and has already blown past the 26 billion for 2020. So the investment is there. That means the technology is more advanced. That means that these companies have clinician staff, on personnel on staff. It means that they're much better funded. They have customers. They're able to access data in order to prove solutions. So we find that startups are really just much further along than they were like 2.5 years ago. And so our coaching is much less with them. If we have a company that says, hey, can you show me some remote patient monitoring or a physician, decision support, we find startups. We have a great network, but we have to do very little coaching now. they're pretty great.
And we've seen deal flow in healthcare related technologies that we've never seen before. Some of that is because they are looking for rapid prototyping, and that's great. We're here for them and want to help them get through that process as well. But not just that. I mean, we've looked at other products as well and are really seeing, just as you said, more money coming in, more companies coming in, more ideas, and at all stages. We're really excited about these opportunities.
That's great. Thank you, Jennifer, for those comments, and Barb and Jessica. Maybe similar question for you. I'm sure seeing more entrepreneurs and companies getting into this space, better funded. What are maybe some of the things that you're looking for at Verizon, or that you observe in that space?
Yeah, and so as I mentioned, we're really focused on 5G, and when we are looking at investments, we're looking for solutions with focused on 5G, but also a broad range of solutions. So for consumer, business, and network. So just to give some examples, for Verizon Consumer, smart home technology, immersive technology, AR/VR, sports technology. We're the official 5G partner of the NFL, which is exciting for me here in Cleveland with the Browns. Streaming technology, real-time sports betting technology. When we're talking about software, enterprise software, infrastructure-based, robotics, drones, computer vision, the sky is the limit. And then on our network, we're looking for something, this is something that might be unique to Verizon with our network as a service strategy, that anything that can enhance our core network or use cases that can enable our network, we're interested in that. And so, just to put a little meat on the bone in terms of what Verizon Ventures looks for, and this is, right now. So I can't say, before COVID, after COVID, but right now what we are looking for is a few different things. And I'll run down a quick list. What problem is the startup solving? And in that, what's the value proposition? The big problem? Is it a small problem? Is it repeatable, or the product repeatable, or you buy it once and you don't buy it again for a few years? So we're looking at that kind of spectrum of the problem that startups are looking to solve. We're looking at the team. If this is really critical for us in early stage investing, is the team capable of delivering the vision of the company? Do they have the significant experience and expertise? Number 3, if you have a product, is there IP around it that we need to know about and evaluate? 4, with software, is it scalable, or does it require a lot of human or capital resources to scale? And for us, the least amount of resources needed, obviously, the more scalable the business is and the more attractive the company is from an investment standpoint. We're going to be looking at the market, and I think that's what Barb and Jennifer are really talking about, right? What is the market? Is it growing fast? How large is it? How does the startup fit into that market? And that obviously changes, as the market changes. 6, we're looking at traction. Are there big name customers that are working with your startup? We want to talk to the customers to learn about what they love with the product. Can the startup retain their customers? What does that look like for them? And then lastly, obviously we're looking at the financials and the valuation of the business. And here, again, being really open about it, it's if there's a pre-revenue company and you're asking for a significant amount of money, like, for example, $300 million, that's not going to be a good fit for us. So we look at that holistically as well. So I think that, overall, this is, there are obviously shifts in the market, and that's reflected, but, we have a really core focus and core objectives around what we're looking for in startups. And that comes through in our conversations with founders and entrepreneurs.
Wonderful. Jessica, thank you so much. So helpful. There are a few questions coming in through the chat now, so I'm going to switch gears. We have about 15 minutes left, so I want to spend a few minutes tapping into a few of these questions. So please, those of you in the audience, please add in some others. We'll start, Jessica, right back to you. You talked about some of Verizon's new digital tools for small business. If I'm an entrepreneur or small business owner, how do I access those?
Yeah, I will put the link in the chat. It is so easy. All you have to do is register, and the platform is at your fingertips. And we encourage you to explore. Just explore, and we have resources on hand to help you through that platform as well. So I'm happy to put that in there for everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you for doing that. And then down to you, Jennifer, the Midwestern locations of Plug and Play. What other locations are there? and what are some of their specialties?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. So we launch in a location when there's some kind of asset in that location. So we launched in Cleveland because there's a lot of healthcare here. We have like an international hospital, really strong regional hospital, the VA, public health. So there's a lot going on here. In Northwest Arkansas, we launched with Walmart around supply chain. Excuse me. In North Dakota, they're having a big expo today. We do ag tech. In Kansas City, we do animal health. Excuse me. So we will launch in a location. When in Houston, we do energy. In Detroit, we do mobility. So, it kind of fits, those regions for what they do. And we want to be where the hub is.
That's great. Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Barb, a question for you and I'll jump in here second. But the question is, how do you advocate on behalf of your startups during the contract legal process, given the relative lack of legal resources?
I think there's a couple different answers to that. First, all of our startups work with an entrepreneur in residence, and we try to pair them up with the EIRs who they need at that time. They may not be attorneys, but they at least have a strong background in understanding the contract and what they should be looking for, those types of things. So they can't really represent them, but they can give them a solid understanding of where the pitfalls might be. We do have a strong network of attorneys who are willing to work with our startups, maybe not entirely pro bono, but at some kind of discounted price, whatever that might look like. And we're always trying to build that just to engage with our community and to provide additional resources and create long-lasting relationships in the community. It is to everybody's benefit that we have attorneys who are well-versed in innovation law and entrepreneurial ecosystems, and that they are supporting our startups and our startups are supporting them. So we try to use those. And we also are in the good position to have funding through the Entrepreneurial Services Program that we can use to help subsidize the cost of attorney in some instances. It's not always how the dollars are spent, and there's a whole process to go through that. But it is one of the applications that we can use. And when that's the highest and best use of those dollars, we're certainly willing to provide support when we can.
Great.
Mike, can I add something in
Please.
there?
Yes.
So Verizon, and I'm particularly proud of this, but we have an extensive pro bono program because we also have an extensive in-house counsel team across the country. And, just from our Small Business Digital Ready, I was excited to learn talking with my colleagues who are leading that initiative that our pro bono program is going to be engaged there and our lawyers will be engaged there. So it's such an important question, right? Because half of the battle with starting your small business is figuring out how to legally start that small business. So we have that. And then something else we haven't touched on at all, but I'll just mention it here because we're on the topic of pro bono legal support. We also launched a pilot in Ohio where our lawyers and our in-house attorneys are providing pro bono support to founders of nonprofits who want to incorporate their nonprofit, but need that support on that end of things to get their 501c3, to get their bylaws and articles of incorporation done. And so that's something else that we're doing here in Ohio. And I believe also in Michigan, I can confirm with Bree, are two of our pro bono pilot states. So we would be happy, if there are folks on this call who are in the nonprofit space and they want to learn more about that, we'd be happy to engage with them as well.
That's great. The only thing I'll add to that we do from the Rev 1 side, we have a similar services partner network where we try to do some discounted legal services. We have our advisors and EIRs that do some advising. I'd say that the other thing that we do is through those advisors is, one, typically they have decades of experience having these kinds of negotiations themselves. So helping entrepreneurs know which questions to ask and what to drive to. The other thing that we do is we want to, I mentioned it before, how do you find that alignment to avoid friction? If you have the right alignment, often your counterpart on the other end is just as motivated to get the pilot done or the deal done as you are. So if you're finding that friction and you're not able to get past it, the question we ask is, okay, is that alignment actually there? And sometimes what we advise is, if it's too cumbersome, or if they're asking too much, or if the terms just aren't where they need to be, pull the plug. Again, there's such little time for the entrepreneur to get these things done. sometimes you got to move on to the next opportunity that maybe is more fruitful or better aligned. And so, knowing when to push and really go after and when to pull back is a really thoughtful and tricky exercise, but can really be beneficial in terms of, again, how do you to improve the odds of you getting those key partners and customers on board? That's a really great question that can be pretty tricky from time to time.
And Mike, it's not specifically related to the sales process, but I would say just having a strong cohort of attorneys who understand startup law is critical for a lot of reasons. There is a story of a company who I don't know who was advising them. They came to us late, and we always prefer to start working with companies very early. They took a lot of small investments. And had very bad advice getting into the process. And it eventually, for all intents and purposes, effectively killed the company's ability to raise any external dollars because there were just too many small investors to deal with. It was more of a headache than anybody was willing to go through. So it is just critical that if you are interested in this space, if you are providing services to companies that are trying to do something that is really disruptive, you've got to have a deep understanding of all aspects and not just one or two pieces of it, because small decisions can be fatal.
I couldn't agree more. Jennifer, I'm curious your thoughts on that, because I'm sure whether you want to be or not, you end up being a quasi third party to some of these negotiations. What are some of your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, well, we specifically run the accelerator for that purpose so that we can expose the startup to as much as they need to know while they're doing the dance of trying to figure out who their next corporate customer is going to be. And we often, obviously, like the others, provide legal advice or workshops on, how to get into healthcare and so on. But we also try to create the startup network so they can use one another to learn from. Typically, that can be some of the best advice you can get. If one of your cohort startups has gone through the same experience, asking them, hey, what was it like for you? Were there any pitfalls that I should be aware of? So we try to do a lot of that, bringing the startups together, creating a cohort so that they can use each other as a resource as well.
Wonderful. There's a question here for Rev 1, so I'll try to quickly answer this since I'm here to moderate. Rev 1, how do we partner to manage corporate funds? So I mentioned before the startup studio as a high level that was initially built with a sole focus on how to engage and work with entrepreneurs. So we think about building entrepreneur talent capacity. We think about making connections between entrepreneurs and customers, capital and investing, and then physical infrastructure and space with our facilities. And so we built those tools and got really good at sourcing, vetting, and investing in high growth, high tech companies. And over time, what we found is different corporations and enterprises wanting us to bring in and say, we like what you've done for the region and the community to work with entrepreneurs. We want to have that competency and that ability as a corporation. So what we're able to do is wrap those different approaches and strategies around an innovation strategy. And at the end of the day, what we end up doing is we stick to what we're good at and finding and investing in entrepreneurs. And then we really lean on our enterprise and corporate partners to be the experts they are in technology. We're never going to know as much about food and beverage as Smuckers, and we work with them. But we can come in and complement their team that's doing some of their long range R&D in really strategic ways. So probably not unlike Barb, what you're doing and finding some of these enterprises. Jennifer, definitely, I'd see a lot of what you do as having certainly some domain expertise, but really leaning on asking the right questions and not being the expert in everything, but knowing enough to kind of where to go and get pointed in the right direction. And Jessica, same for you. There's so many businesses that Verizon is supporting. You could never be an expert in all of them, but you can provide the right resources and tools to help them.
Mike, can I also add something that I think is really important in the last couple of years? And I think, maybe Jessica and Barb have seen this as well. We see the landscape has completely shifted when it comes to who's the competition for these corporations. So that, it used to be that you would go to your provider to get healthcare, but now we're seeing retail pharmacy come into that space, right? So you can go to your local retail pharmacy and have your primary care there. We see startups working with providers and finding that each provider is, completely different. There's only 3% of the market share for one provider. They're all kind of different entities. And so we find the startup saying, hey, actually it's the payer who makes the decision, the insurer, as to whether the product can be reimbursed. We're going to go to the payer. So we now find this like massive shift. And so that's why we, sort of advise the corporate partners in a way that, doing this innovation is not really just a nice to have. It's absolutely necessary for, future survival, for you to be able to compete in the market that you want to compete in, because you really don't know. I'm sure providers didn't, 2 years ago, if someone said, oh, retail pharmacy is going to take over your primary care business, they'd be like, no, that's never going to happen. So, now we have CVS and Walgreens and Walmart all in that space, and Amazon is doing, prescription pharmacy, digital prescription pharmacy, competing with retail farm. And so it's just a lot of movement.
Yeah, that will never happen. 4 famous last words for a lot of industries, I think. We have a couple minutes.
I was just going to add. Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add, if you think about wireless technology from our perspective at Verizon, I mean, if you just think about life before a 4G LTE network, I barely remember it, and I was old enough to live through it. But could you imagine? I mean, 4G LTE, nobody could have predicted the advent of these apps like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, all the things that rely on this wireless technology. So for a company like Verizon, innovation is what takes our technology and puts it to use. And so now this is why we have so much wrapped around how 5G is going to transform and disrupt many different industries, many different sectors to help our lives in different ways. And so, Jennifer, just what you said really resonated with me, because we're kind of living that every day. We don't know what's coming around the corner, or what startup founder is going to take our 5G technology and do something really, transformative with it. And that's the type of thing I think that makes us really proud to create these networks that move the world forward, is that we're helping those innovators use the technology that they need to see innovation really happen in the real world.
Yeah, it's the hospital of the future is going to need 5G.
Right. For remote surgery, right? Right now, it's like, could we imagine, a doctor from the Cleveland Clinic doing surgery in New York right now?
Or in a rural rural places have lost a lot of hospitals.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree.
So we're down to about the last probably minute 40 seconds. I'm wondering if we could just go to the 3 of you, maybe in 30 seconds or less, for the corporate innovators out in the audience. Do you have any last words of advice for them? Barb, maybe you can start.
I would say probably it's harsh, but innovate or die. We just were talking about that. You can't predict what's coming, but if you're not leaning into it, if you're not looking for better products to distribute or better ways to meet your customers' needs, sooner or later, somebody's going to come in and disrupt that industry, and you will be the next buggy whip story.
Innovate or die. I saw Dan Rockwell just joined. I think he's got that tattooed on his shoulder. Jessica, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, think about 5G and how that could be used. I mean, I think this is the next generation of technology, and we want to see that out in the real world. So, and if you don't know a lot about 5G and you want to find out more, please start with Verizon. We're happy to kind of expose you to what 5G has to offer for entrepreneurs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jessica. And Jennifer, last.
I would say don't have fear, have FOMO. So many corporations have tried to work with a startup, maybe it didn't go well, and they're like, I'm never doing that again, too painful. Sort of get over that fear and realize that, the market really is moving in this direction, as Barb and Jessica said. And there's a lot to miss out on if you're not in there.
Yeah, do what you can do to kind of build that into a strength, build it into a competency, so that you can have that adaptive tissue inside the organization for what you're going to need to do. Like you said, I referenced a couple of times, there are things you're going to be doing in 3 to 5 years you couldn't even dream of today. And so how do you prepare yourself for that unknown? Those are great things to take away from this session. So it is 11:45. So I think that wraps up our time. Is there any questions, Megan? You want to?
Well, I'd just like to thank all of you for robust conversation, lots of insights, lots of great key tips and information for all of us that are serving the entrepreneurial community to really engage with you and to keep strategies that will help our entrepreneurs. So thank you again. We really appreciate it. It's folks like you that make these conferences so valuable. And we will be taking a short break. And then at noon, Lieutenant Governor John Husted for the state of Ohio is going to be giving us a talk about his approach to innovation within the state. So we will see you all at noon.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.